Off the cuff, I think I'm going to be speaking about the ego, the human operating system, the soul, the result of the human operating system, and the spirit, otherwise known, I suppose, as consciousness. So when we look at what it is to be a human being, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And if you ask people, what are you, who are you, then invariably it's the ego that answers, because the ego is the program. So let us start from the beginning, from birth. Now, in relation to conception, it is speculated that spirit joins the embryo at 49 days. Now, this 49 days is for a very specific reason, and it occurs quite a bit in ancient mythology and spirituality. I don't exactly know how people came up with 49 days, but they have that figure which states that on the 49th day then spirit enters into the embryo, consciousness enters into the embryo, and from that point forward consciousness is partaking in a human experience. So if we consider consciousness and spirit to be the same thing, because we feel spirited, we feel as if we've got a spirit, some of us. We all know that we're conscious, or most of us do, and we don't know what either of those things are. So it would make sense if we say, you know, it's only semantics. Spirit, consciousness. Okay, so look. In my travels, people, I've concluded a few things, and I'm settled with consciousness being spirit. There is spirit pertaining to everything. Absolutely everything, as far as I'm concerned. And I spoke the other day about finding a certain little mushroom in a field, and I said, look, the field where you're going to be finding these little aliens needs to be a spirited field, because you will never find them in a cultivated field, like a field that's been given to growing crops for several years, many years. Why? Because the spirit has been taken out of it. How's the spirit taken out of the land, Aaron? Well, as far as I can gather, people, by stripping it of its ancient nutrients. Now that stands to reason to me, because if you strip a land of its ancient nutrients, all of the minerals, all of the bacteria, all of the living essence from that field, well, you strip it of its spirit. What's left? You've got dry, arid, bacterialess, nutrientless, mineralless, dead land. And that's why nothing will grow in it unless it's fertilized. And these fertilizers these days, they have an enormous amount of antibacterial stuff in them, kills bugs and all different sorts of things, so it kind of like feeds them the nitrogen and a few other minerals that the crop needs, and it's solely intent on killing everything else. And so it kills spirit. And for those of you that have stood in ploughed fields or fields with crops, wheat or corn or whatever, you won't feel any spirit. Whereas if you go into ancient pasture land that hasn't been turned or cultivated or fertilised, then if you are a spirited person tuned in to Gaia, you'll most certainly feel that. You'll feel the richness of it. Now, let me just tell you about a certain something. In recent times, let's say before the summer, I was frequenting these incredible national parks, which of course for millennia haven't been cultivated. Lots of these lands, they're on rocky outcrops or highlands, and they're not really suitable for cultivating in any case. But not only that, they've been listed lands due to their spirit, people, due to their spirit, because the ancients knew that these lands were spirited and sacred. When you dig up a handful of this earth, it's as black as the ace of spades. It's full with microbes and what's to say? Minerals and life forms. The black richness of it, you just know it's super healthy. Whereas if you grab a bunch of a ploughed field, what is it you've got in your hands? A brown grey clay. It's had all the life form extracted out of it. So now we're getting our heads around why land has spirit, people. If it's been untouched, if it hasn't been fucked around with, if it hasn't been killed, then you'll find spirit there. And so when you have an area of land with spirit, and there's been grazing animals on it for many years, laying layer over layer over layer of manure, then what's this do? You will encounter spirit there. And you'll know when spirit's there because you've got a whole bunch of living organisms. Fungi thrive in these spirited lands. So, now we are kind of establishing a little bit what spirit is and where to find it. I've spoken many times about spirits being in trees and in fields. How you doing, bud? And in all different sorts of lands, all around the world, natural lands. There's a natural spirit there. And I've been to places which have been considered to have been ancient lands of Aborigines and people like that. And you just feel it. You just feel it. If you can't feel it, then you're spiritually dead. So, there is a spirit. These spirits, or the spirit, comes in many, many myriad of forms. And you can feel a different spirit of every single wood or spinney that you enter into. They all have their own individuated characters, personalities, spirits. So, spirit is the essence, the fundamental basis of the cosmos. And quantum physicists, people like John Hagelin, PhD, theoretical physicist, CEO of the Transcendental Meditation Organization, or at least he was, I don't know if he still is. He spoke about how the universe fundamentally is conscious, spirit, and everything derives out of spirit. And then when we read all different sorts of religions, then we can see that things manifested out of spirit. All the mythologies all over the world, in the beginning, you know, the spirit, and then spirit said this and did that, and then made manifest the physical matter. So, spirit is fundamental, right? Spirit comes into the embryo, the fetus, 49 days. Then it just lies there, just along for the ride. Then, during the development of the fetus, I'm sure that the ego will start to grow, because when all the brain and all the organs form, the baby becomes aware in the womb, and it has an awareness of its mother's temperament, mother's energy. And there are many people that have spoke for many years about when a mother has certain experiences, it is passed on to the child. Now, when people are born with nervous dispositions, if we look back at the mother's experience during the pregnancy, we might find very traumatic events which may lead us to conclude a certain something. But of course this study is almost non-existent, and look, there's many facets of this, and in this book that I'm reading now, Isis Unveiled, Madame Blavatsky, the co-founder of the Theosophical Society, she recalls instances of fetuses, children actually being born with very bizarre defects that resemble the mother's experience in life. And there can be things like, if a mother was terrified by a snake on one occasion, then the baby, when born, will have some sort of a snake birthmark on it, or have some sort of a hair lips, snake mouth, or one of the attributes of the snake. And you may think that that's completely ridiculous, but there's so much about this world that we just don't know, people. And there's a whole bunch of instantiations of this theory. And in this book that I'm reading, she collated and compiled many of them. And what would the doctors say? Oh, coincidence. Oh, just a mutation. Just a freak. Well, when you look into the psychology of the woman, there's a very valid explanation that potentially could be the reason. Because the woman's psyche was so disturbed by something at the time, it was then projected into the fetus, into the growing child within her womb, because it became a part of her psyche. And when things become a part of our psyche, then they become a part of our essence. So, that aside, there's so much to say about spirit. But if we just accept for this moment in time that the spirit is the reason why we're here, spirit is everything, and spirit thinks things into being. Quantum physicists say, because the quantum field is conscious, they consider it to be conscious, because we don't know what conscious is, so it's a very feasible thing to assume that that's conscious. And everything comes out of conscious. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was good, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. Well, what do they mean in the beginning was the Word? In the beginning was a thought. In the beginning was consciousness. And out of consciousness made manifest the world, the cosmos, according to the Bible and many mythologies and religions. They all get this from the same sort of place, being endowed with the creative spirit. So, during the growth of fetus into a child in the womb, then at some stage it starts to get a little bit of an ego. It starts to be aware, at least, that it is a separate entity it can hear something else going on, mother's voice and people talking outside, and you know, all different sorts of stuff. It's only a thin membrane, people, and so you know, the baby would have quite a lot of awareness, and lots of people have given accounts that they have been aware in the womb about certain things. And so when the baby is born, then it is like a blank motherboard, and it is programmed by mother, family, friends, society to be a certain something. What is that certain something? It's just a human body, literally like an ape, with a advanced operating system, a human operating system, which has been endowed with the notion of self. I'm an I, me, separate to you, and all those sorts of connotations. So when we go through the years, the ego grows and grows and grows like a computer when more and more programs are added to the motherboard. Well, what is the motherboard? It's potential. That's all, and it's nothing until programs are downloaded to it, uploaded. I don't know what the terminology is. What is a human being? Nothing when it's born until it has its programs, until it realises it's an I, and it has connections with family and the earth and people and all different sorts of things. And when we become older, then the ego becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, more expansive, and people start saying, oh, you know, I'm a male and I'm this old and I'm this profession and I'm a father, I'm a mother, and you know, all these different sorts of things. Well, who is that? What is that? They're just programs, aren't they? So when we ask people, what are you, who are you, the correct answer would be a conglomerate of experience. That's all we are, a conglomerate of experience, because if we didn't have the experience, then we wouldn't be anything. We'd have no discernment about anything. So take away all the programs from the computer and you just call the motherboard. The motherboard is just pure potential. So the human being, when born, is pure potential. So if you take the ego away from the human being, then what do you have? You have a clean slate, a motherboard with no programs. And I suppose you'd have something like, I don't know, a mentally impaired person or catatonic person, a person with no self-awareness, no sense of I, just a blubbering human body. Little more or nothing more, less than a primate. So when we then look to see what the soul is, well, what exactly is the soul? The soul is the life force of the human body, and it's the energy, it's the thing that makes spirit give life to the body. So spirit uses the consciousness to give rise to the ego, which eventually creates a soul. Now, the soul is a very complex thing, and you can read many different accounts of what it actually is. But when you read the Bible is emphatic that the soul is different from the spirit. And the soul is said to be something that goes on after the body's died. Now, I wonder how that could be. How could a program which pertains to the brain continue in the ether when the body's dead? I don't know how that would work, people, because we've got this hard problem of consciousness. to broach if we say that. How can the human brain and the human body, which is capable of storing information on its motherboard, how can that information from the motherboard then leave the body when the body dies? Can the information leave a computer when the computer dies, when the motherboard burns out? No. You lose the information, don't you? You can copy the information, just like you can copy our information by listening to people and writing stuff down and recording and all that sort of stuff. We can extract our memories and our knowledge to a certain degree. But can we take that knowledge, that essence which is considered to be soul, the life energy of the body, into the ether when we die? I don't think so. And so lots of people don't believe that either. And they say, well, when the body dies, spirit leaves the body, consciousness just leaves the body. And even when human beings have something wrong with their brain, it appears that consciousness leaves the building. Catatonics, maybe some people in comas. There's lots of different stories which you can listen to and read about certain experiences. But what I will say about the consciousness seems to leave the body on lots of occasions, like near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences, because the consciousness can look at the body in the bed. Now, I've never had that experience being out in the astral where I have observed my body in the bed, but I've observed being in a very, very different environment, seemingly more real than here, being absolutely compos mentis, and knowing that I'm in the astral and I have a body in the physical world and I'm engaging with astral beings. I know this, and it's very bizarre. But is that just a creation of consciousness? Do we actually go to other places? Many spiritual people will swear that these astral realms and the ethereal realms, they are very, very real. And they seem very, very real. And when we take entheogens, we go to places which seem like they are the very, very fundamental premise of the cosmos. They are so vast in their intelligence that it makes this place look ridiculous in comparison. So who knows about that? But certain conclusions that I've been compiling, due to my experience and knowledge combined, then I'm thinking, well, we can never get outside of the spirit. The spirit is the actual essence of this thing. The cosmos is spirit. And spirit is in everything. Everything is within spirit. It's kind of like when we dream. When we dream, everything is within the dream, isn't it? And what's creating the dream? The unconscious, which isn't really unconscious, of course, it's conscious in a different way. It's just that the ego isn't aware of that consciousness, so we call it the unconscious. Freud or Jung called it the unconscious, because the ego isn't aware of it unless we become lucid. But it isn't unconscious. It's just another variety of consciousness, which is inventing stories whilst the body is sleeping, because consciousness doesn't need to sleep. And so it continues to create whilst the human body is sleeping. And so consciousness can engage in dreams, consciousness can engage in out-of-body experiences, consciousness can go to different worlds depending on the state of our brain, what influences we are under. Consciousness, spirit, can manifest in a whole myriad of realms, and it's endless. And just one of the gazillion facets of it is the human egoic experience. So the human ego experience thinks that, oh, I'm a body, I'm separate from everything else, which is false. I have a spirit, which is false. You don't have a spirit, you are spirit. You do have an ego, or the ego is you, your human operating system, because it is grown with you, just like your body's grown. The ego has grown with you. It's the program that's come along for the ride, which engages with the human body, whereas the spirit is just there like a fly on the wall to come along for the ride, but it doesn't partake. And so when people speak about the soul leaving the body, well, it could be the soul that leaves the body in a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, because the soul is the conglomerate of the earth experience. And so when I've been out of body, I have remembered who and what I am in this physical form. And I go into the astral realm and I'm like, you know, I'm a human being and I'm having this fucking crazy experience, and then I end up back in the body, or I'm looking again from the vantage of my body when consciousness has come back on in the body. You see, whilst most occasions when we leave the body, well, I would think all occasions, because I've never been aware of me lying in bed when I've been in the astral. But I know I have a body lying in bed in the astral, but I'm not thinking from that vantage point. I'm not lying in bed thinking, oh, my consciousness or my spirit, my soul is out in the astral now. No, my consciousness, my soul, my ego has left the body, and it's gone into another dimension of consciousness. And so when people say that the spirit leaves the body when we die, well, I don't know for how long. I mean, lots of people with near-death experiences speak about, oh, you know, people talking to them and asking them, do they want to come back, and this, that and the other, because if you cross this line, then that's it, you can never go back. Well, does that mean that this egoic soul dies then, because it can't leave the earth environment? And then you go back to source, because the only thing that is crossing over the event horizon outside of the earth environ, so to speak, is spirit going back to source. And the human operating system, why would you need a soul which remembers everything that you've done being a human being on this earth? Why would you need that? Why would it be a thing? You know, if we come back, you know, with reincarnation, then if we have thousands and thousands of these experiences, well, I mean, what sort of capacity is required to remember all that stuff, and why? But then, you know, people start speaking about, oh, we've come back here to learn, and if we don't learn all we need to learn, then we've got to come back again. And we only don't come back again when we've learnt everything, and we know that we are pure spirit, and we go back to source. And going back to source just means that you're like a drop of rain. If it's a cloud, it's been a cloud, isn't it, at this moment in time? It's turned into mist and it's hanging in the air. But when it condenses and then it gets heavier, then it falls back down to earth and it enters again at some stage the ocean. And it's kind of like it enters consciousness en masse. So the spirit that is sharing this human experience ultimately goes back to source. And so that seems perfectly reasonable. And when it goes back to source, it doesn't know anything about being human beings. It doesn't know anything about being raindrops. The ocean doesn't remember it being a raindrop. It doesn't remember these tiny particles of water falling on the ground and maybe being drank by a creature and then excreted by a creature, and through hundreds, thousands, millions of years, you know, ending up then back in the ocean, back at source. And so I think that's more feasible than what spirit does. It goes back to source and then we don't remember anything. There's no reason why we should. But there is an occasion whereby we can enter other realms, and it's like the Italian author Dante. He wrote about the Divine Comedy, the trilogy of hell, purgatory and heaven. And he describes, you know, in his imagination and calling on much literature through the years, what these places are like. And then you've got Milton with his Paradise Lost, speaking about basically the fall of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, the fall of man. But there is so much to be said for the human egoic state of consciousness entering into other dimensions, like when we take psychedelics and all those different sorts of things. So it does appear that the soul can leave the body temporarily and experience other things, but it can't leave the body indefinitely and go into heaven, like the Bible says. Because that just doesn't make sense on any single level. Everybody's in heaven forever and ever and ever, remembering that you were just one human being. What's the purpose of that? And you know, will heaven ever get filled with all different people from all different sorts of epochs on the globe? Let's say in 50,000 years in the future, you've got maybe alien greys, you know, we've morphed into these alien greys and they're in heaven as well, and we're walking around with all these. Come on, people, it doesn't make sense. It's completely preposterous, absurd, when we really start to use our rational application to these things. It just breaks down. It's just like an idea for the fool who doesn't want to think about something, and they just go, oh, I'm going to heaven. And then when you ask them, well, what is heaven? They haven't got a clue, because in the Bible it's got about 3 lines which says what heaven's like, and it is very, very bereft of any meaningful description. And so you would have thought God would have given humanity a bit of an idea of what they're supposed to be looking forward to, but no, he didn't think that far. And so, anyway, people, I'm just running by things that I consider I've learned, and I know via my experience. And of course, all of our experience is different, and we've all got a different idea of heaven and hell, and what spirit is, and what the soul is, and what the ego is, and what the self is, and all these different sorts of things. But if you ever take the interest and you read scripture and psychology and philosophy, religion, about what people throughout thousands of years have said that these things are, then you'll be better equipped to make your own decisions, and then you can base that on whatever your experience has been. Now, my experience has been pretty vast in the spiritual realms, because I've had, you know, lots of encounters with varying spirits and spiritual realms in many different ways. You know, some spontaneous, some natural, some induced, and so I have experienced other worlds. And I'm like, well, I know other worlds to be true as much as the next man who wrote about this stuff years ago. Because, you know, that's where it all comes from. When Dante wrote his Divine Comedy, well, of course, he was calling on the Bible, he was probably calling on the Quran, he was probably calling on the Upanishads, calling on the Bhagavad Gita, calling on Zoroastrianism, calling on a whole bunch of religions which said something about what people have experienced about the so-called afterlife. Because near-death experiences, of course, have been going on forever. Out-of-body experiences have been going on forever. So people have listened to these stories, they've compiled them, and sometimes they've experienced them themselves, and then they've wrote about it, like I have in my book. So if you guys are interested in any of the things I say, I speak about all this stuff in fine detail, hello sir, in my book, and I explain why I am speaking the way I'm speaking. And you will listen to all of my supernatural experiences, all of my entheogen experiences, all of my out-of-body experiences, all of my deep meditative experiences. I've had a whole bunch of experiences which I've written about and put it down for posterity. And so you can buy that book for £20 on Amazon.co.uk under the title of A Journey to the Self. You can also buy the book with the title Closer to God on Amazon.com, which is £25. It's a bigger volume, you see. The printing cost is a little bit more, and so that's one of the reasons for the price discrepancy. So there you have it. I've just given you an overview, and for those of you that are familiar with Milton's Paradise Lost, you're familiar with Dante's Divine Comedy, you're familiar with the Bible's interpretation of spirits and demons and devils and all that, and other religions like Islam and, you know, Zoroastrianism or Buddhism or whatever, all these sort of things. If you've started to gather a knowledge bank of information of what other human beings have concluded in their years, then what I've said to you would make perfect sense. But if you haven't, then it's just words, it's just an idea, and you just click off the video onto the next, and it will mean nothing. You won't take it with you, you won't archive it into your knowledge bank of this particular subject matter, because it really interests you and you find it fascinating and you want to remember some of the things I've said. You see? So when I'm speaking in my videos, I'm often saying that I'm coming from such a depth which is vastly over and above and outside of most people's comprehension, due to the amount of experience that I've had. And that experience, of course, is 61 years life experience, a billion previous lives, and thousands of books read, and an enormous amount of global travel. So there is an enormous amount of experience in the awakened grave. And so, you know, you make of me what you will. Anyway, I've got to go and become a Viking now. It's time to be a Viking now, people. Yes. Was a philosopher, now a Viking.